Dawnbringer, Book 2, Chapter 15, Descent, Part 1. At the coming of morning light, the company rises and prepares to depart. The night was dry and much more pleasant than the preceding nights. Even the wind blew in no more than a gentle breeze throughout the nocturnal hours. And even though it picks up now, whistling in the trees and flapping against the cloth of the tent as they try to roll it up again, they mind this very little. For though the air is cold, it is not bitter, and the quiet of the night has allowed all of them an adequate rest to dispel the exhaustion of the previous days. And no one had a single nightmare. Syrian and Eldarian both slept between 3 and 4 hours, taking turns, such that someone was awake for the entirety of the night. But that amount is more than adequate for both of them, though for different reasons.
I find it puzzling that the nightmares stopped suddenly for all of us,
says Syrian.
Puzzling, but not unwelcome. I simply don't know what it means, or whether it portends good or ill, or neither.
At least one answer may await us soon, today or tomorrow.
Eldarian responds.
We shall soon know, I hope, whether this force is located at the mouth of the river or not, or at least we shall know the cause of the river's dryness, not that such an answer is particularly relevant to our journey.
I hope that it is not relevant at all.
Rawlane says.
Whether a particular river is dry or not, and why, should have no bearing on our path across the mountains to the west. If it does have bearing, I don't see how it could be anything but ill.
Neither can I. But we do not see all factors. Let us wait and see.
Or rather, let us move and see,
emphasizes Elmarie with a smile.
We shall all get cold and stiff if we stand around in this temperature much longer without moving our bodies.
Wisely spoken, little one,
says Syrian.
Many a man stands around freezing when he could be walking. Let us not be of their kind.
And so they depart, following still the dry riverbed as it winds its way through the valley between the mountains. Now again a deep ravine of loose rock worn by the flowing of water over many decades. And considering its size and the stone polished almost to a gloss, this river must indeed have flowed swift and free for hundreds of years. Massive trees clothe the knees of the mountains to their right and their left, but the center of the valley has no more than a scattering of trees or small groves, evergreens and aspens and alders, swaying in the strong morning wind. But despite the small number of trees directly ahead of them, they cannot see to the other side of the valley, for the land rises ahead of them with only a narrow ravine through which the riverbed cuts. Because of this, only as they come to the far end of the ravine, or to the apex of the hill, if they decide instead to climb the rise of land rather than going through its heart, will they begin to see what lies on the other side of the valley. By the early afternoon, they come to the point where precisely this decision must be made. Follow the narrow and rocky path between the walls of the ravine, which would mean more or less walking in the riverbed itself, or climb the rough mounds of earth that rise up perhaps 200 feet on either side. They deliberate for a few minutes together, and after inspecting their surroundings, they decide to climb the hill. The ascent is rough and steep, but far from vertical, and they are able to make it to the top without needing to rely on their hands, though it takes the better part of 2 hours. And now they find themselves on a broad shelf of land that looks almost as if it had cascaded down from high on the sides of the mountains, as if an avalanche that had filled up the entire middle section of the valley and over many years had been covered in soil and sprouted plants and trees. There seems to be no other natural explanation than this. It does not, however, explain the river that had flowed right through the heart of the mound, as if cut with a sword wielded by some creature 1,000 times larger than a human being.
Do you think that the river itself was unnatural rather than its damming?
Asks Eldarion, his question directed to all alike.
It does not look like it flowed by any natural process through the heart of this. Well, I am not quite sure what to call it. It appears to be a hill, and yet its shape feels somehow unnatural as well.
It is Rawlane who first answers.
What does it appear to be to your eyes? What seems to be its purpose?
What do you mean, you think it has a purpose?
Eldarion asks.
If it is not born of nature, then it is born of artifice, and the artificer must have had a purpose in doing what he, or it, did.
You are right,
replies Eldarion.
though I suppose even the artificer of nature always works with a reason, even if that reason is the simple beauty of what exists, and its form. But this follows not the form of the rest of nature. It is different, less beautiful, less harmonious, more, as it were, utilitarian.
I suspect the same,
Syrian says.
It seems to me that this structure, even if it poses as a natural feature of the landscape, is rather a tool in service of a master. And whatever the master may be, it is frightening to think that he has power even over the earth itself, or at least enough power to harness its shape for his purposes.
And we still plan to move forward?
Asks Tiliana.
Here is another sign that we walk into danger, into the realm of a force of immense power, power greater even than our imagining.
It is only a circumstantial sign,
Replies Syrian.
as this looks to have been fashioned centuries, perhaps millennia, in the past. But you are right in this. The unnatural nature of the river, combined with its present dryness, raises unsettling questions. However, I loathe the thought of travelling back to the mouth of the mountain pass and heading north from there. It is a great loss of time that, if it were possible, I wish we could be spared.
And it would be unfortunate to turn around if there was in fact no cause for concern.
Adds Eldarion.
However, we are already at the highest point in the valley. If we only continue a mile or so further, perhaps we shall be able to see the other side. I feel that answers may await us there.
I don't know whether that makes me feel more consoled or less.
Says Tiliana.
But if we see something, whatever that might be, that could be a danger to us. I offer my vote that we turn around.
That may likely be wise,
Says Syrian.
but I agree that we should at least take a look from our vantage point if it indeed proves as near as Eldarion hopes. Yet I give you my word, Tiliana,
He adds, looking at her.
that if we see anything that might endanger us, we shall turn around without hesitation.
Tiliana nods, and as the company begins to move again, Elmarie places her hand upon her shoulder.
Worry not.
She says softly.
Both Eldarion and Syrian will do nothing to endanger us.
It is not their benevolence that I doubt.
Replies Tiliana.
It is their weakness. Weakness of mind to see dangers ahead of us soon enough to avoid them, and weakness of body to resist them when they come.
Why are you so afraid?
Elmarie asks her. They are now walking side by side a short distance behind the rest of the company.
I feel.
She continues, but hesitates.
What is it?
Tiliana asks.
It is hard to say, and I tend not to speak of these things.
Replies Elmarie.
What things?
What I feel in the deep spaces of my heart. I trust Eldarion's judgment here, because I feel the same as he. I feel a force of great evil, that is true. But I also feel another, greater presence inviting us to move forward into the unknown. It is It is important that we move forward precisely here. I do not know the reason, for I do not know what we shall find, but there is something that awaits us. This much I am certain, both Eldarion and I now know. And Syrian, I imagine, has discerned it as well.
Oh, Elmarie, it is just so hard to lean on the seeing of others when I myself do not see.
Tiliana exclaims, though she keeps her voice soft.
It is not meant to be easy, nor is it meant to be the end.
Replies Elmarie tenderly.
Even obedience is not meant to end in mere trust in the wisdom and direction of another. Rather, trust is meant to give way to vision, to open the eyes to see what before they could not see. And I trust that this shall soon be so in your case. Your eyes are already alert and sensitive, and it shall only take a small amount of time until they adjust to the new atmosphere, like pupils dilating in the darkness to see what before was hidden in shadows.
Do I really want to see what is hidden in shadows?
Asks Tiliana.
You must answer that question for yourself.
Says Elmarie.
Just as you must choose your own path and stand within your own conviction, even if the aid and guidance of others is invaluable in helping you to discover and to remain firm within that place.
Yes.
Tiliana sighs.
And the answer is obvious. I desperately desire to see. We were made to see, weren't we? Of course, not the darkness, but the light that shines in the darkness and beyond it. That is the reality for which my heart thirsts, and I will go anywhere in order to attain it, even through the blackest night. I only wish it were not necessary to do so.
To Tiliana's surprise, in response to these words, Elmarie does not speak, but instead her face lights up with enthusiasm, and her eyes glisten both with passion and with tears, and then she draws Tiliana into a full embrace.
What is it?
Tiliana asks after a moment.
Your words, they just...
Replies Elmarie, whispering with her mouth beside Tiliana's ear.
Your words moved me deeply. For the reality of which you spoke, that too is my sole desire. For myself, but also for others. I seek it for myself, for it draws me like the strongest of magnets, or like a current that carries me with impetuous force. And I seek it for others, because I know that in it alone can they too find peace, security, and rest.
Then Elmarie steps back and looks deep into Tiliana's eyes. She smiles softly, and her eyes are indeed aflame.
Wherever we walk and whatever lies before us,
she says,
forget not the light that you seek, and then the darkness cannot overcome you.
Will you pray for me and help me? For I am afraid to walk alone.
Asks Tiliana.
With all my heart.
Elmarie replies, and with that they turn and continue on their way, joining the others who, noticing their pause, have stopped 30 or so yards ahead to wait for them. They walk for a little over 2 miles until they come to the place at which the mound begins to descend before them, sloping down until it rejoins with the floor of the valley far below. And as they come to this place, what they encounter raises as many questions as it answers. In the distance, at the far end of the valley in the fold of the mountains, stands an ancient castle fortress, made of stone as black as the darkest night and as dull as ash, not reflecting the light of the sun that shines full upon it, but rather, as it were, absorbing or devouring it. Even from this distance they can see that spikes rise from its parapets and its spires like claws, reaching up to the sky, not in obeisance, but in rebellion.
It is an ill place,
says Eldarion.
That much is clear for all to see.
Then we have found our answer.
Adds Syrian, looking deeply at the castle for a moment and then turning to his companions.
We shall follow your request, Tiliana. Let us linger here no longer, despite the many unanswered questions that remain with us. I gave you my word, and I intend to keep it. An evil presence lives within the walls of that castle, or at least it did in years long past. And either way, the shadow of its presence remains lingering. I feel the weight of it upon my heart already.
As do we all,
says Rorlane, gritting his teeth.
Let us make haste away.
After this, they turn back and, without a single glance over their shoulders toward the castle, they trace their steps to the opposite slope that they had ascended shortly before. By the time that they have climbed down to the level of the valley once again, the day is beginning to decline toward evening, yet they decide to continue on for at least a little longer in order to put some distance between themselves and the mysterious castle. As the land begins to sink into darkness, they stop and find a small grove of trees not far from the path in the shelter of which to spend the night.
Syrian,
begins Rorlane.
Did you not say that the river once took its origin from a lake high in the mountains?
I did.
Where is it now?
My apologies,
says Syrian.
but I did not mean to imply that I myself have ever been this way. I spoke from hearsay about the lake.
Then how did you know about the shortcut through the mountains?
Asks Elmarié.
I just assumed that it has been taken by others. Yet I get the feeling now that no man has come this way in many years.
I know not how to explain it,
Sighs Syrian.
for the castle looked to have been ancient. It puzzles me, therefore, that I have never heard of it, and that all the accounts I have heard of the mountain pass seem to be directly contradicted by what our eyes have seen today.
Could it be some kind of trickery? First there have been nightmares, and now there is, I don't even know what to call it.
Tiliana says.
If anything has been trickery,
Replies Syrian.
I would think it was the lake rather than the castle. Maybe its owner has long concealed it from mortal eyes.
I do not care to know.
Says Tiliana.
My wish now is to get as far away as possible. For something strange is occurring, and a great evil seemed to emanate from the walls of the castle, sweeping across the valley like a bitter wind and blowing upon my face as I looked out upon it.
We all felt it,
Eldarion says.
and we shall leave at first light. I regret the loss of time that this path has cost us, but I also do not regret our discovery, for perhaps we have indeed found a stronghold of the enemy that would have lain hidden for many years had we not discovered it this day.
You tend to see the positive in every situation.
Says Tiliana.
Where I see only fear, even absurdity, you find a hidden meaning.
Eldarion looks at her for a moment, softly shaking his head, and then he replies quietly.
I don't know that I agree with you, but I walked for many years in what appeared to be absurdity, face to face with the horror of war and death, and found that even there meaning can be found. It seems to me that nothing in this world is absurd, even if its meaning surpasses our understanding. We are just so small, and our sight so dim that the threads of meaning often escape our notice, and we do not realize the tapestry of beauty in which we are being woven.
Then his voice falls silent, and he smiles awkwardly, as if the expression comes to him unnaturally.
I do not know why I say such things. I was not even aware of it myself until I put it into words.
I think I am beginning to understand.
Says Elmarié, a glint in her eyes as she looks at Eldarion.
Well, I hope that I can find some meaning in all of this and all that has.
Tiliana begins, but her voice falls silent before the thought is finished.
Some meaning in all that you have suffered, and all that you have lost.
Eldarion finishes for her.
I am aware that my words sound insensitive, and I plead only that I did not know what I said before I said it. Forgive me.
Tiliana stutters.
I mean, you don't need to ask for forgiveness. None of your words were ill-spoken. They are just hard to hear.
Eldarion opens his mouth to reply, but then simply nods in silence.
Why do we not all now try to get some rest?
Asks Syrian.
I shall keep the first watch.
You do not understand, you petty little creatures,
the voice says, echoing in Tiliana's mind.
You claim to cling to meaning and purpose, but all things are absurd, empty, like a hollow vessel waiting to be filled. And there is only one thing that fills it: power.
She sits up with a start, breathing heavily, and looks around. It is deep in the night, a sky bursting with countless stars above her head, and in its light she looks around, seeing that all of her companions are fast asleep.
I have the power to give back to you what you have lost.
The voice continues, speaking directly into her mind.
Is that not what you wish?
I'm not going to speak with you, creature,
she replies in the same mind speech.
Leave me alone.
You need not speak. Only listen. In the world there is no meaning, but that which you put into it. Is not everything but a facade that conceals emptiness? At one moment, something appears beautiful and precious to you, only in the next moment to appear vain and empty. At one moment, you are satisfied, only in another moment to be dissatisfied. Do you value your family? Then you put meaning into it. Do you value victory in war? Then that becomes meaningful for you. But your weak mind thinks that it is discovering meaning rather than inventing it. But that is due only to your weakness. Become strong, and then you shall see. You shall gaze into the abyss of absurdity that lies just below the surface of everything, the pretty little surface of this petty little world. But worry not, I can show you how to stand strong against the vortex of emptiness, and to bring forth from within you that meaning that you seek. But it shall be yours and yours alone, such that none can take it from you. Only then shall you find constancy and stability in that which is born of your own will, for what you yourself have created, none can take away. Why rely on the fading things that today are here and tomorrow are gone? Why rely on receiving, whether the light of the sun or the seed of man? Everything you need already lies within you, and nowhere else.
While the voice speaks, Tiliana rises to her feet and places her hands over her ears, pacing back and forth and shaking her head as if to dispel the words or at least to keep herself from hearing them. But throughout this monologue, the voice only echoes more loudly and clearly within her. And only through what happens next does she realize that she is still dreaming. Until this moment, the nightmare has been so real, so vivid, that she did not realize that she slept. But now she knows, and she feels that anguishing split where part of her is aware of her dreaming and is trying to wake up, and yet the other part of her is sunk in unconsciousness and simply follows the trajectory of the dream without thought or resistance.
Come to me,
the voice says firmly. The command is strong and unbending, and in response she finds herself saying,
Yes, master.
And then she begins to walk away from the camp and toward the narrow cleft between the hills, toward the castle.
No, no, Tiliana! What are you doing? Turn around! Go the other way!
But she cannot stop her body. It is no longer obeying her, but another force entirely.
Wake up, wake up! He is toying with you. Only if you wake up can you resist him. He has power over you only because you sleep.
But what follows is not wakefulness, but further dreaming. Her surroundings shift, and she finds herself no longer walking in the narrow space between towering walls of stone. Rather, she is in a broad meadow glistening in the sun, wildflowers dancing in the breeze all around her. And as she looks, she sees in the distance the figures of her family walking toward her, Al Señor, Anar, and Beita. They move together, their hands interlaced with one another, approaching her with steady step and unerring intent. But she cannot simply stand and wait for them. She takes off at a sprint, quickly crossing the distance between herself and her family. El Señor smiles at her gently while he releases the hands of their children. Both of them, laughing and crying, come running towards her. She opens wide her arms to receive them. And then, carrying them both as if they were again but infants, she rushes into the welcoming arms of El Señor, only to pass through him as if through a ghost or shadow. She turns back again, and he is gone. In that moment, her children too dissolve within her very arms, and she finds herself alone, looking around frantically. And as she does so, the clear sky turns to dense and threatening clouds, and lightning strikes near her, causing an instantaneous clap of thunder that shakes the very foundations of the earth. Terrified, she runs. It does not matter which direction. She must simply get away from this terrible place, from these shadows of loss that promise presence and give only absence. She must escape. And as she runs, her head strikes against a hard surface and she falls to the ground. At the impact of the blow, she is jarred into wakefulness, and the visage of the dream blows away in an instant. She awakens lying on her back, looking up at a narrow strip of sky between two columns of rock. And then the throbbing pain in her head overtakes her, and she slips into another kind of unconsciousness than sleep.